is now on the border, and that water rights would be respected. There would be complete and total freedom of movement within the contiguous West Bank and between the West Bank and Gaza. Even today, Israel has given up control over the Rafah crossing. It now has a video which it can watch to see as Palestinians monitor exit and entry through the Rafah gateway. That's going to be the future. And if there is a will to peace, if there is a desire to make sure that there are two states, not simply one state, a Palestinian state, then all of these issues can be resolved and will be resolved. Israel has shown the will to resolve these issues. Certainly, I support a resolution that gives dignity, gives economic viability, gives political freedom, and freedom of movement to the Palestinian people.
And sovereignty over East Jerusalem?
And sovereignty over East Jerusalem.
Let me quote once again. I purposely quoted Justice Bergenthal because I know of Mr. Dershowitz's opposition to the World Court. I therefore quoted the U.S. Justice, not the World Court, who stated that the segments of the wall being built to protect the settlements are ipso facto in violation of international humanitarian law. That's 80% of the wall. 2 months later, Israel's High Court stated, in contrast, that the separation wall must take into account the need to provide security for Israelis living in the West Bank, including their property rights. That's in direct contradiction to Justice Bergenthal's separate declaration, unanimously by the World Court.
That's right.
And if you would like his comment about how international law, Israeli law supersedes international law in East Jerusalem because it was annexed to Israel illegally, I'll be happy to provide it to you. Just send me an email.
But that's not what you said.
Please hold. Let's go to the next.
Michael Sevi, I'm a second-year student at the law school. Professor Chomsky, it seems like you've done a lot of remembering and very little imagining. And Alan Dershowitz's ideas, if they seem funny to have a train or, some type of other high-tech connection, at least they're creative and at least they're moving us forward. How do you deal with the issues of refugees? How would you connect Gaza and the West Bank? Or is the only solution in your mind a one-state solution? What would you do about Jerusalem?
Well, as you would know if you looked at anything I'd written instead of... If you look at anything that's written, I've been supporting a two-state settlement since the early 1970s, and in print, and perhaps you can show me some of Mr. Dershowitz's material in print supporting it. I haven't found it. But yes, that's my position since the early 70s, all in print. As for connections, the issue, recall, at Camp David and at Taba and today is territorial in the West Bank. Okay, the current proposals are exactly as I described. Go through the sources I mentioned or find any other ones that you think are serious. Those are the major Israeli and Western academic sources and human rights organizations and so on. Yes, they break up the West Bank into 3 Bantustans, as Benvenisti said, with virtually no organic connection to East Jerusalem, which is the center of Palestinian life. That's why the EU and the European Union and Human Rights Watch and others flatly reject them. Now, it is possible, what Israel is in fact doing now is developing a huge infrastructure system in the West Bank with highways for Israelis and paths for Palestinians, so that they don't have to interact with one another, which means that this network around the West Bank, which will be annexed to Israel, roughly 40 to 50%, people can travel in it in great comfort from the suburbs around Tel Aviv, including all the water resources, including the most arable land. They can get to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. The Palestinians will be following paths. Actually, I can read to you, if you like, how Israeli journalists are describing that. And if you'd like to check it out for yourself, I'd suggest sometime that you take what's officially called the Palestinian Road from Bethlehem to Ramallah, which takes like 10 minutes on the Jewish highway. I've taken it. It's a little winding road. The dirt road goes right next to a wadi. If it's not raining, you're lucky if you don't fall into it. And off on the hill, you can see the paths where people are sort of moving. On the days when the settlers are not traveling, the roads are empty because there's no way to get anywhere. I mean, you go in a broken-down taxi cab up to a barrier, and then you transport someone who needs dialysis, say, or a pregnant woman, carrying over a ditch, and you go to another cab and so on. Yeah, that's kind of contiguity. And again, I say the same thing. If that's reasonable, then fine. Let's impose that kind of contiguity on Israel.
Okay, hold, please. You have a very brief response.
First of all, listen to the words. There's an element of racism in one of the phrases we've heard today in describing this as a Jewish highway. 1.2 million Israelis are Arabs. Many of them are Christians. There is no such thing as a Jewish highway in Israel. There are Muslim highways in Saudi Arabia. There are Muslim-only roads in other parts of the world. But there is no road, there's nothing in Israel that is opened only to Jews, even synagogues. Everything is open to Israeli Arabs. Every road is opened to an Israeli Arab. When the peace solution is finally proposed, had the Camp David and Taba Accords been accepted, the Palestinians would be free to build any superhighways they choose. And indeed, Israel has offered now a superhighway and a super roadway between Gaza and Jerusalem. Between Gaza and Hebron. And the idea of, it's very difficult, I acknowledge, how to connect East Jerusalem to Bethlehem, to Ramallah, and to Jericho will require a challenge. But people are working on it. There are creative solutions being proposed. I am waiting, along with